A girl sees an unconscious old woman becoming food for buzzards. Then she does something shocking. Comment saying what you thought of this story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and tell me what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better. So subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The buzzards circled in slow loops over the highway, connecting Havenwood to the district of Pine Ridge, when Lily appeared, walking barefoot on the hot asphalt. At 4 years old, the girl knew every trail and shortcut in the region, but today something different had drawn her attention to that isolated area. The punishing Georgia sun beat down on the ground as she cautiously approached what looked like a pile of clothes among the blackberry bushes. Eleanor Vance, 78 years old, lay motionless on the side of the road, her weak breath almost imperceptible in the suffocating heat. The birds of prey had begun to peck at her arms, leaving small wounds as she remained unconscious. The old woman had left home in the morning to pick wild blackberries, a tradition she had kept for decades, but something had gone wrong along the way. Lily screamed with all the force her small lungs could muster, scaring away the buzzards, which moved off reluctantly. The girl knelt beside Eleanor, touching her face gently. She had learned on the streets to recognize when someone was still breathing, when there was still hope. For more than 2 hours, she remained there under the merciless sun, protecting the elderly woman from the buzzards that returned periodically, until finally the sound of an engine approached. The truck driver, Thomas Jackson, stopped when he saw the unusual scene, a frail child defending an elderly woman who had fallen by the roadside. He carried Eleanor to the bed of his truck, while Lily refused to leave the woman's side. Throughout the entire journey to the regional hospital, the girl held Eleanor's wrinkled hand, whispering words of comfort she had heard other people say when she herself was hurt. In the emergency room, the nurses tried to separate Lily from Eleanor, but the girl clung to the rails of the gurney with a determination that surprised the professionals. Dr. Mark Roberts, the physician on duty, allowed her to wait in the hallway while he examined the patient. Eleanor had suffered a fall, probably due to a dizzy spell caused by the heat and her advanced age, but nothing that put her life at risk. When Eleanor woke up a few hours later, the first thing she saw were Lily's large, dark eyes watching her through the rails of the hospital bed. There was something in that gaze that deeply touched the old woman, a mixture of genuine concern and an inner strength that she recognized from her own youth. The girl said nothing, just smiled shyly when she realized Eleanor had woken up. The social worker, Jennifer Matthews, arrived at the hospital shortly after, carrying a folder with information about Lily. The middle-aged woman explained to Eleanor that the girl was known to the region's social services, a child who had run away from the municipal shelter 3 consecutive times, and whom no one could locate when she disappeared. Lily knew every hiding spot, every alley, and every abandoned house between Havenwood and the neighboring districts. Eleanor watched Lily as the social worker spoke. The girl was dirty, her clothes torn and her hair tangled, but there was a dignity in her posture that contrasted with her appearance. When Jennifer mentioned they would have to take her back to the shelter, Lily visibly flinched, her eyes filling with tears that she struggled to hold back. It was then that Eleanor made a decision that would change both their lives forever. A widow for 15 years and childless, she had spent the last few years in her small caramel candy business, living a solitary routine in her house on the outskirts of town. Something about that brave little girl who had saved her life awakened a protective instinct she hadn't felt in a long time. During the conversation with Jennifer, Eleanor proposed to take Lily in temporarily while she recovered from the fall. The social worker hesitated at first, questioning whether an elderly lady would be able to care for a child who had proven to be so independent and unpredictable. But the glint in Lily's eyes upon hearing the proposal and the way she instinctively moved closer to Eleanor convinced Jennifer to consider the possibility. The first few days at Eleanor's house revealed surprising aspects about Lily. The girl possessed an extraordinary memory, especially when it came to observing and replicating recipes. Just by watching Eleanor prepare sweets once, Lily could repeat the entire process with impressive precision, remembering every ingredient and every cooking time. But there was something more intriguing about the girl. During the first weeks of living together, Eleanor noticed that Lily had the peculiar habit of quietly whispering names of people she didn't know, always just before the storms rolled in. It was as if the girl were talking to someone invisible, a behavior that initially worried the old woman. The summer storms in Georgia came with strong winds and torrential rains, but Lily always seemed to know when they were approaching, even when the sky was still clear. She would become restless, walk around the house whispering strange names, and then, inevitably, the dark clouds would begin to form on the horizon. Eleanor, who had always been a skeptical and practical woman, began to attribute this to the keen intuition of someone who had survived on the streets. The following weeks brought a routine that Eleanor hadn't experienced in years. She would wake up early to prepare breakfast and find Lily already awake, sitting in the kitchen, watching the movement of the birds. In the yard, the girl had a habit of getting up before the sun, as if her body were still programmed for survival on the streets, always alert to possible dangers. During breakfast, Lily demonstrated her extraordinary powers of observation. She noticed when Eleanor put an extra pinch of sugar in her coffee, when the milk was about to boil over, or when the toast started to get too brown. It was as if all her senses were calibrated to pick up the smallest details of her surroundings. In the small candy workshop attached to the house, Lily became a fascinated observer of the culinary processes. Eleanor had spent decades perfecting her recipes for caramel candies, peanut brittle, and coconut macaroons, but the girl's presence brought a new dynamic to the work. Lily would sit on a high stool, following every movement, every measurement, every cooking time with an impressive concentration. It was during one of these afternoons that something happened that left Eleanor deeply disturbed. Lily was helping to wrap the candies when she began to whisper a name the old woman knew very well. Hope. Hope is coming. The name of her twin sister, who had disappeared during a flood in 1963, came from the girl's lips with a chilling naturalness. Eleanor dropped the package of caramel she was wrapping. How could this child, who had grown up on the streets and never had contact with her family, know the name Hope? The old woman knelt in front of Lily, holding her shoulders gently but urgently, asking how she knew that name. The girl just looked at her with her large, dark eyes, seeming confused by her own reaction. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She walked through the house, revisiting painful memories she had tried to bury for decades. Hope was her twin sister, just 10 minutes younger, but who had always been braver and more adventurous. On the day of the flood, they were both 15 and playing near the river when the waters rose suddenly. Eleanor managed to hold onto a branch, but Hope was swept away by the current and was never found again. Over the next few days, Eleanor watched Lily with renewed attention. The girl continued to whisper unknown names before storms, but now the old woman paid attention to the details. They were always old names, names her grandmother used to mention. When she told family stories, Sebastian, Irene, John David, how could a child who grew up without a family know these names? The answer began to form when Jennifer Matthews paid a routine visit to check on Lily's adjustment. The social worker brought with her a more complete file on the girl's history, information that had recently been collected through a more in-depth investigation into her origins. Lily had been found as a baby in front of the old Rosary Church in the historic center of Havenwood. The location was significant to Eleanor for a very specific reason. It was exactly where she used to leave flowers and candles for her sister Hope every year on the anniversary of her disappearance. The coincidence was too disturbing to ignore. Jennifer explained that a woman named Irene Vance had been admitted to the municipal hospital with complications in childbirth about 4 years ago, but had fled the hospital with the baby before the doctors could provide adequate care. The records indicated that the woman was in a state of extreme vulnerability, possibly suffering from postpartum psychological problems. The surname Vance made Eleanor's heart race. Her paternal family had carried that name for generations, but she thought the lineage had ended with her and Hope. The possibility that Lily might be a distant relative, perhaps a descendant of Hope, began to take shape in her mind, mixing hope with the fear of being disappointed again. During a particularly hot afternoon, Lily was playing in the yard when she began to sing a melody that Eleanor hadn't heard in decades. It was a simple song, almost a lullaby, that she and Hope used to sing when they were children. The lyrics spoke of two little birds who got lost in the forest and spent their whole lives looking for each other. Eleanor approached slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. She asked Lily where she had learned that song. The girl stopped singing and looked at her with a thoughtful expression, as if trying to remember something from long ago. "A lady taught me," she said finally. "A lady who used to sit near the river, crying and singing." The description was vague, but enough to make Eleanor sit down heavily on a yard chair. For all these years, she had visited the site of the flood regularly, especially on the anniversaries of Hope's disappearance. Was it possible that a family member had survived and was nearby without her knowing? That night, Eleanor made a decision that would change the course of their lives. She would investigate Lily's origins thoroughly, even if it meant reliving pains she had tried to overcome. The girl had saved her life on that road, but perhaps she had also brought with her answers to mysteries that had haunted her family for decades. The next day, Eleanor and Lily walked together to Rosary Church, where the girl had been found. The parish pastor, Pastor Mike, was watering the flowers. In the garden, when he saw them approaching, he recognized Eleanor immediately. After all, she had been coming there for years, leaving offerings for Hope. When Eleanor explained her suspicion about the possible family connection with Lily, Pastor Mike became thoughtful. He vaguely remembered a woman who used to appear at the church in the early hours of the morning, always carrying a small baby. The woman would sing softly and leave flowers in the same spot where Eleanor always made her offerings. The pastor was never able to talk to her properly, as she always fled when someone approached. The revelation that someone else also visited the place where Hope had been honored for so many years left Eleanor disturbed. Was it possible that Lily was really part of her family, a connection to the past she had lost? The coincidences were piling up in a way she could no longer ignore, and the need to discover the truth became increasingly urgent. The investigation into Lily's past took Eleanor to places she hadn't visited in years. Accompanied by the girl, she walked through the oldest neighborhoods of Havenwood, talking to residents who might have known the mysterious Irene Vance. Each conversation brought fragments of information that gradually assembled a disturbing puzzle. Mrs. Gable, a lady who lived near the municipal hospital, remembered a young woman who appeared in the area about 4 years ago. She was visibly pregnant and in great distress, asking for a family named Vance. The woman seemed lost, as if she had been looking for someone for a long time, but could never quite explain who she was or where she came from. Lily listened to these conversations in silence, playing with small stones or drawing in the dirt while the adults talked. Occasionally, she would look up when a name was mentioned, as if something sounded familiar, but she never interrupted or asked questions. Her ability to remain quiet and observant impressed Eleanor, who realized the girl was absorbing much more information than she let on. At the city records office, the clerk, Mr. Peters, helped Eleanor search for any document related to the name Irene Vance. It was a frustrating search, as the files from the last few years were incomplete due to a fire that had destroyed part of the administrative building. The fire had been considered suspicious by the authorities, but was never properly investigated. The news of the fire brought a new dimension to the mystery. Mr. Peters explained that many hospital records and birth certificates had been lost in the incident, especially those related to problematic or irregular cases. There were rumors that the previous administration had tried to hide cases of medical negligence by deliberately burning compromising documents. During these investigations, Eleanor began to notice worrying changes in Lily. The girl, who had adapted well to the routine of the house, began to show signs of anxiety. She would wake up in the middle of the night screaming, had constant nightmares, and at times refused to eat altogether. It was as if reliving the search for her origins was awakening traumas she had managed to suppress. Dr. Mark Roberts, the same doctor who had treated Eleanor at the hospital, suggested that Lily be examined by a child psychology specialist. The girl had lived through traumatic situations on the streets, and the pressure of discovering her identity could be affecting her mental health more deeply than they imagined. The consultation with the psychologist, Dr. Evelyn Reed, revealed surprising information about Lily. The girl had a rare neurological condition that amplified her ability to perceive patterns and environmental changes. This explained her apparent premonitions about storms and her extraordinary ability to memorize complex recipes. However, the same condition made her more vulnerable to stress and emotional trauma. Dr. Reed explained that Lily would need specialized care and regular medical follow-up for the rest of her life. The treatment included behavioral therapy, specific medication, and an extremely stable and loving environment. The costs would be significant, especially for a retiree like Eleanor, who lived only on the small candy business. The revelation about Lily's special needs was accompanied by another devastating blow. Jennifer Matthews informed her that, due to Eleanor's advanced age and her own health condition, she took medication for her heart and had episodes of high blood pressure. It would be very difficult to get official custody of the girl. The system required guardians to have adequate physical and financial conditions to care for a child with special needs. Eleanor felt crushed by the injustice of the situation. She had found in Lily the family she never had, and the girl clearly felt safe and loved in her company, but the bureaucracies and limitations of the system threatened to separate them again, forcing Lily to return to the overcrowded shelter from which she had fled so many times. Desperate, Eleanor made a decision that would change her life forever. She decided to sell her small candy factory to get the money needed to pay for Lily's specialized treatment and, perhaps, impress the social workers with her financial ability to care for the girl properly. The factory had been her life's work, built slowly over decades of dedication and sacrifice. Every piece of equipment, every recipe, every customer won represented years of effort. But Eleanor did not hesitate to put it all up for sale when it came to Lily's well-being. The buyer was a businessman from Oakwood City named Richard Taylor, who presented himself as interested in expanding his food business to smaller towns. He offered a reasonable price for the factory and promised to keep the employees and the quality of the products. Eleanor, anxious to get the money quickly, accepted the offer without investigating much about the man's background. The transaction was done in a seemingly legal manner, with signed contracts and stamped documents. Richard paid a significant down payment and promised to pay the rest in monthly installments. Eleanor used part of the money to schedule private consultations for Lily in the capital and began the process to regularize the adoption. For the first few weeks, everything seemed to be working as planned. Lily responded well to the beginning of the treatment, and Eleanor felt hopeful about the future. The girl continued to help in the kitchen, now preparing homemade sweets on a small scale just for their own consumption, and her culinary skills continued to impress the old woman. But the happiness was short-lived. Richard Taylor disappeared without a trace, taking with him not only the factory, but also all the money he still owed Eleanor. The phone numbers he had left did not work, the address was fake, and even the documents he had presented turned out to be counterfeit. Eleanor discovered the fraud when she went to collect the second installment and found the factory abandoned, with damaged equipment and spoiled products scattered on the floor. Her employees had been dismissed without notice, and there was no way to contact the scammer. In a few months, she had lost her life's work and was practically destitute. The news of the financial loss came at a time when Lily was going through a particularly difficult phase of her treatment. The girl had begun to remember fragments of her previous life, confusing and painful memories that left her agitated and scared. Eleanor needed to be strong for both of them, but she felt the weight of age and despair pressing on her shoulders. With few resources left and no source of income, Eleanor and Lily began to depend on the generosity of neighbors and city assistance programs. It was a humiliating situation for the old woman, who had always been independent and proud of her work. But what hurt her most was seeing Lily regressing in her treatment due to the instability and stress of the precarious financial situation. Poverty arrived like a silent storm, turning the household routine into a daily struggle for survival. Eleanor, who had always been a woman of modest but stable means, now had to count every penny to ensure there was food on the table. The money left from the fraudulent sale of the factory was quickly running out with the costs of Lily's treatment and basic household expenses. Lily noticed the change, even being so young. Her observant eyes caught the details Eleanor tried to hide: the accumulated bills on the kitchen table, the increasingly empty refrigerator, the collection calls that made the old woman sigh heavily. The girl had stopped asking for toys or treats, as if she instinctively knew it was no longer possible. During a particularly difficult morning, when Eleanor was trying to stretch the little rice she had left to make lunch, Lily approached her in the kitchen. The girl had been watching the old woman's movements for a few minutes, her expression thoughtful and concentrated. Then, unexpectedly, she suggested something that surprised Eleanor. "Grandma Eleanor," Lily said in her tiny voice, "why don't we make sweets like before and sell them at the market?" The suggestion was simple, almost naive, but it carried a practical wisdom that impressed the old woman. Lily had observed the entire production process of the old factory and apparently understood that those skills could be turned into a source of income. Eleanor looked at the girl with a mixture of sadness and admiration. It was painful to think of producing sweets again after losing her factory so cruelly, but Lily's idea had merit. With the few pieces of equipment she had managed to save and the recipes she kept in her memory, it would be possible to do homemade production on a small scale. The first days of production were challenging. Eleanor had to adapt her recipes to the few ingredients she could afford, while Lily proved to be a surprisingly competent helper. The girl remembered every detail of the processes she had observed, from the exact cooking time to the ideal texture the sweets should have. Lily's ability to create flavor combinations proved even more impressive when they began to experiment with local ingredients. The girl suggested mixing caramel with blackberry pulp, a combination that initially made Eleanor skeptical. But when they tasted the result, they discovered a unique and delicious flavor that didn't exist anywhere else in the region. The first trip to the farmer's market was a moment fraught with nervousness and hope. Eleanor had borrowed a small table from Mrs. Gable and arranged her homemade sweets simply but carefully. Lily stood by her side, helping to package the products and interacting with customers with a naturalness that surprised everyone. The blackberry-infused caramels became an immediate sensation at the market. The locals had never tasted that specific combination of flavors, and soon a small line formed in front of Eleanor and Lily's makeshift stall. The recipe had been Lily's creation, but she insisted on giving all the credit to Eleanor, calling her the best candy maker in the world. The initial success brought temporary financial relief, but it also attracted the attention of people they would rather avoid. Richard Taylor had left debts in the name of the old factory, and some creditors began to look for Eleanor, demanding payments for commitments she had not made. The legal situation was complicated, and the old woman had no resources to hire a lawyer. Jennifer Matthews made an unexpected visit during this turbulent period. The social worker was concerned about the reports she had received about Lily's living conditions and came to check the situation personally. She found a simple but clean house, a well-cared-for child despite the financial difficulties, and an elderly woman fighting with all her strength to maintain the dignity and well-being of the girl. During the conversation with Jennifer, Eleanor confessed her financial difficulties and her worries about being able to continue Lily's treatment. The social worker was visibly moved by the old woman's dedication, but also concerned about the sustainability of the situation. She suggested that Eleanor seek help from local organizations that supported families in vulnerable situations. It was through one of these organizations that Eleanor got to know Pastor Mike more deeply. The clergyman had mentioned Lily's story during a service, asking for prayers for the girl and her caregiver. Several people from the community offered to help, either by buying sweets, donating ingredients, or simply offering words of encouragement. The community's support brought a new perspective to the situation. Eleanor realized that she was not alone in her struggle, and that there were people willing to help without expecting anything in return. Mrs. Anderson, the owner of the local bakery, offered to sell Eleanor's sweets in her shop, significantly increasing the reach of their sales. But not all was good news. During a routine checkup, Dr. Reed reported that Lily was showing signs of regression in her development due to the family's financial stress. The girl had started having frequent nightmares again and was becoming more withdrawn, behaviors that indicated that the instability was affecting her psychological well-being. The revelation that the financial situation was harming Lily's health was a devastating blow to Eleanor. She had fought so hard to keep the girl with her, but now it seemed that her own poverty was causing damage to the child she loved so much. Guilt and despair began to consume the old woman, who wondered if it wouldn't be better for Lily to return to the shelter system. During a particularly difficult night, when Lily woke up crying from a nightmare and Eleanor couldn't properly comfort her, the old woman made a painful decision. She called Jennifer and said that perhaps it would be best to hand over custody of Lily to a family that could offer better financial and treatment conditions. Jennifer was surprised by the call, but agreed to visit the house the next day to talk about the situation. Eleanor spent the night awake, watching Lily sleep and wondering if she was making the right decision. The girl looked so small and vulnerable in bed, and the thought of being separated from her again broke Eleanor's heart. The next morning, before Jennifer arrived, something unexpected happened. Lily woke up earlier than usual and found Eleanor crying silently in the kitchen. The girl approached, climbed onto the old woman's lap, and said words that were forever etched in Eleanor's heart. "Grandma, I don't want to go away. This is my home, and you are my family." The simplicity and sincerity of Lily's words renewed Eleanor's determination. She realized that despite the financial difficulties, she had built something with the girl that was much more valuable than money, a true family based on love and mutual care. When Jennifer arrived, Eleanor had changed her mind and was more determined than ever to find a way to keep Lily with her. The social worker was impressed with Eleanor's change of attitude and suggested they explore other alternatives before considering separation. There were government support programs for foster families, possibilities for partnerships with non-governmental organizations, and even the chance to formalize the small candy business to have a more stable income. The conversation with Jennifer brought new hope, but also the awareness that it would take a lot of effort and dedication to overcome the difficulties. Eleanor and Lily were willing to fight together, united by the bond they had built and the certainty that they belonged to each other, regardless of the circumstances that fate might place in their path. The month of June brought the traditional Founders' Day festivals to Havenwood, and the whole town transformed into a grand celebration of music, dance, and typical food. Eleanor and Lily had managed to get a small space at the church's community festival to sell their sweets, an opportunity that represented the chance to significantly increase their income and perhaps stabilize their financial situation. Lily was particularly excited about the festival. She had helped Eleanor prepare a wider variety of sweets, including special versions of the famous blackberry caramels that had become their trademark. The girl demonstrated a culinary creativity that surprised even Eleanor, suggesting combinations like caramel with pecans and coconut macaroons with brown sugar that turned out to be delicious. During the preparations, something extraordinary happened that would completely change the course of their lives. The festival featured musical performances by local artists, including a folk guitarist named Samuel Morgan, a man of about 50 who played traditional Georgian folk songs with a skill that enchanted everyone who listened. When Samuel began to play a specific melody, an old song about two brothers who got lost in the forest, Lily immediately stopped what she was doing. The girl, who was arranging the sweets at the stall, stood completely still, her eyes fixed on the guitarist. Then, to the surprise of everyone around, she began to hum the lyrics of the song, word for word, with a sweet and tuned voice. The lyrics Lily sang were not known by anyone at the festival, not even by Samuel himself, who stopped playing to watch the girl. It was a more complete version of the song, with additional verses that seemed very old, almost as if from an oral tradition that had been lost in time. Lily's voice echoed through the churchyard, creating a moment of respectful silence among those present. Eleanor felt her heart accelerate as she recognized the melody and part of the lyrics. It was the exact same song that she and Hope used to sing in their childhood. But Lily knew verses that not even Eleanor remembered. How was it possible that a 4-year-old child knew such a complete version of a song that had been lost in family memory for decades? After the performance ended, Samuel approached Eleanor and Lily, clearly intrigued by what had happened. He explained that the song had been taught to him by his grandmother, a woman named Hope Morgan, who always said the song was special to her family. The name made Eleanor stagger and lean on the stall's table. Samuel continued, saying that his grandmother Hope had appeared in the Pine Ridge area more than 50 years ago with no memory of her past, and was taken in by a family of fishermen on the banks of the Savannah River. She had suffered some kind of trauma that erased her memories, but she retained fragments of songs and stories that she told her grandchildren, always saying that one day she would find someone important who also knew those songs. The revelation that Hope had survived the flood and lived all these years just a few miles away left Eleanor devastated. Her twin sister had been alive all this time, had built a new family, had known grandchildren while Eleanor lived, believing that she had disappeared forever in those turbulent waters decades ago. Samuel realized the impact of his words and began to make connections between the names and stories his grandmother always told. Hope often spoke of a twin sister named Eleanor, of a house where they made caramel candies together, of fragmented memories of a childhood she could never fully recover. The pieces of the family puzzle began to fit together in a painful but revealing way. With tears in her eyes, Eleanor told Samuel the whole story of Hope's disappearance during the flood, how she had searched for her tirelessly, how she had visited Rosary Church for decades, leaving flowers and prayers. Samuel was moved to realize that his grandmother had spent her entire life trying to remember the family she had never completely forgotten. The tragedy deepened even more when Samuel revealed that Hope had passed away the previous year at the age of 77, taking with her the secrets of a life she could never fully rebuild. She had spent her last months particularly agitated, always talking about a little girl who needed help, a child she felt she had to find. Lily, who had listened to the whole conversation in silence, approached Eleanor and held her hand, as if sensing the suffering those revelations were causing the old woman. The girl looked at Samuel with her large eyes and asked if Grandma Hope also knew how to make sweets. The simple question brought a sad smile to the man's face, who confirmed that his grandmother was known in the region for the sweets she made and sold to help support the family. Samuel then revealed something that completely changed the perspective on Lily's situation. Hope had repeatedly mentioned in her final years a daughter she had been forced to give up for adoption due to extreme poverty when she was very young. This daughter, according to the fragmented stories Hope told, would be named Irene and would carry the surname Vance as a way to maintain the connection with the family. The revelation that Irene Vance, Lily's biological mother, was Hope's daughter, meant that Lily was Eleanor's great niece, a family connection that explained not only her exceptional culinary skills, but also her intuitive knowledge of family songs and traditions that seemed to be engraved in her genetic memory. Eleanor hugged Lily with a new intensity, realizing that the girl who had saved her life on that dusty road was, in fact, the last link to her lost sister. All the coincidences, all the mysterious connections, all the signs she had tried to ignore finally made sense. Lily was not just a child she had decided to take in, she was her blood relative, the continuation of a lineage she thought had ended. Samuel, moved by the discovery, said that Hope had left some belongings stored away, including old photographs and documents that could help reconstruct the family's history. He offered to show these items to Eleanor, hoping they could fill the gaps in the family's memory and perhaps find clues about Irene's whereabouts. The Founders' Day festival continued around them, but for Eleanor, Lily, and Samuel, the world had stopped. They had discovered they were family, united by bonds that time and suffering could not completely break. The song Lily had sung had served as a key that opened doors to a past everyone thought was lost forever. When they returned home that night, Lily asked Eleanor if they were a real family now. Eleanor held the girl's face in her hands and said that they had always been family, but now they knew it officially. The discovery brought a new dimension to the love they felt for each other, a connection that went beyond care and was rooted in the very history of their lives. The week following the discovery at the Founders' Day festival brought a mixture of joy and melancholy that permeated every moment in Eleanor's house. The confirmation that Lily was her great niece had filled a void she had carried for decades, but it also intensified the pain of knowing that Hope had lived so close for all those years without them being able to reunite. Samuel fulfilled his promise and brought Hope's belongings in a time-worn wooden box. Inside were yellowed photographs, letters written in trembling handwriting, and some personal objects that the old woman had kept as treasures from a life she struggled to remember. Among the most precious items was a notebook where Hope had jotted down fragments of memories that occasionally returned. Eleanor leafed through the notebook with reverence, reading excerpts that described recurring dreams of a twin sister, candy recipes that popped into her mind without explanation, and the constant feeling that she had lost something very important. Hope had written about the song she had taught her grandchildren, always saying that someone special would one day know how to sing it completely. Lily watched everything with the natural curiosity of a child, but also with a perception that went beyond her years. She gently touched the objects that had belonged to her great-grandmother, Hope, as if she could feel the family connection through physical contact. When Eleanor showed an old photograph of two identical girls, Lily immediately said they looked like her when she stood in front of the mirror. The most important photograph was at the bottom of the box, a black and white image where Hope appeared next to two small girls, one of them clearly her daughter as a baby. On the back, in Hope's characteristic handwriting, was written Lily's full name and her date of birth, proving that the great-grandmother not only knew of the child's existence, but had spent her last years searching for her. The discovery that Hope knew Lily and had searched for her brought a new dimension to the family mystery. Samuel explained that his grandmother had become increasingly agitated in her last months of life, always talking about a little girl who was in danger and needed to be found. She had visited orphanages, shelters, and even consulted with social workers, but she was never able to locate the child. Hope's frustration was understandable when they discovered she had been looking for Lily in the wrong places. The girl had fled the official shelter system and was living on the streets, exactly in the places where a respectable elderly woman like Hope would never think to look. Fate had conspired to keep the family apart, even when everyone was trying to find each other. Eleanor was devastated to realize that if she had looked for Hope with more determination, if she had expanded her searches beyond Rosary Church, they might have reunited in time. The guilt for not having made more effort to find her sister mixed with the joy of having discovered Lily, creating an emotional whirlwind that affected her health. During this period of emotional discovery, Lily's health began to deteriorate again. The girl was processing complex information about her family and origin, as well as dealing with changes in her treatment routine due to financial difficulties. She started having frequent nightmares again and episodes of anxiety that deeply worried Eleanor. Dr. Reed explained that discovering her family origins, although positive in the long run, was causing additional stress for Lily in the present moment. The girl needed stability and continuity in her treatment, but Eleanor's financial situation made this increasingly difficult. The specialized medications Lily needed were expensive, and the local public health system did not have adequate resources for her type of neurological condition. Samuel, moved by the situation of his new family, offered to help financially, but his own resources were limited. He worked as a musician at local events and occasionally as a mason, earning just enough to support his own family. The goodwill was there, but it didn't solve the practical problem of the costs of specialized treatment. The situation became even more complicated when Jennifer Matthews made an official visit accompanied by her supervisor, a rigid woman named Ms. Carmen Lewis, who had received reports about Lily's living conditions. The supervisor expressed concerns about Eleanor's ability to provide the specialized care the girl needed, especially considering her advanced age and financial limitations. During the visit, Ms. Lewis asked direct questions about the resources available for Lily's treatment, questioned the stability of the housing situation, and requested updated medical documentation on the girl's progress. Her questions had an official tone that made Eleanor extremely nervous, realizing that the possibility of losing Lily again was becoming real. The pressure of the official visit visibly affected Lily. The girl, who had shown progress in her social development, reverted to withdrawn and distrustful behavior. She hid behind Eleanor throughout the entire conversation and refused to speak to the social workers, a behavior that was interpreted negatively by Ms. Lewis. After the social workers left, Eleanor had an anxiety attack that left her struggling to breathe. Samuel, who had witnessed the visit, helped calm the old woman and took care of Lily while Eleanor recovered. It was a moment that highlighted the fragility of the situation and the urgent need to find a permanent solution to the family's problems. That night, Samuel stayed for dinner and talked at length with Eleanor about possible solutions. He mentioned that Hope had left a small amount of money saved in a bank account that he had never touched, as he always felt that money should be used to reunite the family his grandmother had searched for so long. The revelation brought a spark of hope to the desperate situation. Samuel explained that Hope had saved every penny she could over the years, always saying that one day she would need the money to fix the things that went wrong in the family. She had instructed that if anything happened to her, the money should be used to find and help the lost relatives she knew existed somewhere. Hope's inheritance was not a fortune, but it was enough to cover Lily's specialized treatment for a few months and perhaps regularize her legal adoption status. More important than the monetary value was the symbolic meaning. Hope had managed to help her family even after she was gone, finally fulfilling her dream of reuniting the loved ones that fate had separated. Eleanor cried when Samuel offered to use Hope's inheritance to help Lily. It was as if her twin sister was sending a message from beyond, proving that family love transcends time and circumstances. The solution to their most urgent problems was coming through the posthumous generosity of someone who had dedicated her entire life to searching for her lost family. With Hope's financial resources, Eleanor envisioned the possibility of not only keeping Lily with her, but also offering the girl the specialized care she deserved. The discovery of the inheritance brought renewed hope for the future, but also the awareness that they would have to use this gift very wisely to ensure a stable future for the entire newly reunited family. The process of accessing Hope's inheritance proved more complicated than Samuel had anticipated. The bank required a series of documents proving not only the family relationship between him and his deceased grandmother, but also the legitimacy of using the funds to benefit Eleanor and Lily. The bank's bureaucracy turned out to be an unexpected obstacle that significantly delayed their plans to stabilize the girl's situation. While they waited for the funds to be released, Lily's health continued to deteriorate. The girl had completely stopped eating in recent days, refusing even the sweets she herself helped prepare. Her nightmares intensified, and she began to exhibit regressive behaviors, such as wetting the bed again and speaking in infantile voices that deeply worried Eleanor. Dr. Mark Roberts, who had been following the case from the beginning, suggested a temporary hospitalization to stabilize Lily's condition. The girl was showing signs of severe neurological dysregulation that could have permanent consequences if not treated immediately. But the hospitalization would cost more money than Eleanor had available, creating a vicious cycle of needs she couldn't meet. Desperate, Eleanor made a decision that would drastically change their lives. She decided to sell her house, the last valuable asset she owned, to get immediate funds for Lily's treatment. The house had been left to her by her parents and represented not only her housing security, but also decades of family memories she would have to abandon. The news that Eleanor intended to sell the house reached Ms. Lewis, who interpreted the decision as further evidence that the old woman was unfit to care for Lily properly. The supervisor issued an official report recommending that the girl be immediately removed from Eleanor's custody and placed with an adoptive family with better financial conditions. Jennifer Matthews received the order to retrieve Lily with a mixture of professional sadness and personal outrage. She had witnessed the girl's progress under Eleanor's care and knew that despite the financial difficulties, there was genuine love and dedicated care between them. But the system's rules were clear. and she had no autonomy to question her supervisor's decisions. On the day scheduled for Lily's removal, the house was filled with a tangible sadness that seemed to permeate every object, every room. Lily, who sensed the adult's agitation, hid under Eleanor's bed, refusing to come out even when Jennifer tried to talk to her gently. The girl screamed that she didn't want to leave, that this was her home, and Eleanor was her family. Eleanor tried to explain to Lily that the separation would be temporary, that she would fight to bring her back as soon as she could solve the financial problems. But the girl, with her sharp perception, understood that there was a high probability they would never see each other again. She clung to Eleanor's neck with desperate strength, begging not to be taken away. The separation scene was devastating for everyone present. Samuel, who had arrived with the finally approved bank documents, found Lily being carried screaming to Jennifer's car, while Eleanor collapsed in tears at the front gate. The money that could have solved all their problems had arrived too late to prevent the system from tearing the family apart again. Lily was taken to a specialized shelter for children with special needs located in Oakwood City. The distance of nearly 100 miles made visits difficult for Eleanor, who didn't drive and depended on precarious public transportation to make the trip. The first attempts at visiting were painful, with Lily refusing to talk or eat, always asking when she could go home. The shelter, although well-structured and with qualified professionals, couldn't offer Lily what she needed most, the stable emotional bond she had developed with Eleanor. The girl regressed significantly in her development, losing social skills she had acquired and reverting to self-destructive behaviors she hadn't displayed in months. Dr. Reed, who continued to follow the case even after Lily's move to the shelter, was alarmed by the girl's deteriorating condition. In her report, she emphasized that the separation from Eleanor was being more harmful to Lily than any financial limitation they might have faced before. The child was clearly suffering from severe depression and abandonment syndrome. Samuel used Hope's inheritance to hire a family law specialist, Mr. Reginald Cole, who analyzed the case and identified several irregularities in the process of Lily's removal. The main flaw was the lack of consideration for the established emotional bond and the absence of a proper transition period that respected the child's psychological well-being. The lawyer prepared a formal challenge to Ms. Lewis's decision, arguing that the child's best interest was being neglected in favor of purely financial criteria. He requested an independent evaluation by a multidisciplinary team that could consider all aspects of Lily's development, not just the material conditions of her caregiver. While the legal proceedings followed their slow course, Eleanor sold the house for a price well below market value to a real estate speculator who took advantage of her desperation. With the money from the sale, she rented a small apartment in Oakwood City to be closer to Lily, even knowing that visits were limited and supervised. The move to Oakwood City was traumatic for Eleanor, who left behind not only her home, but her entire social support network. In the big city, she felt isolated and lost, struggling to adapt her small candy production to a more competitive and impersonal market. Sales dropped drastically, and she could barely pay the rent for the tiny apartment where she lived. During a particularly difficult visit, Lily begged Eleanor not to leave at the end of the permitted time. The girl had lost a significant amount of weight, her eyes were dull, and she showed clear signs of deep depression that alarmed even the shelter staff. Seeing Lily in that state broke Eleanor's heart and strengthened her determination to fight for her return. The shelter staff began to question internally whether the separation was beneficial for Lily. The facility's coordinator, Dr. Patricia Morse, observed that the girl only showed signs of improvement during and shortly after Eleanor's visits, returning to a depressive state as soon as the old woman left. This suggested that the problem was not the quality of care at the shelter, but the absence of the specific bond Lily had formed. Samuel, determined to help his new family, temporarily moved to Oakwood City to support Eleanor during the legal process. He found work as a musician in local restaurants and helped the old woman re-establish her candy production, using his network of contacts to find sales points in the city. The partnership brought greater financial stability but didn't solve the main problem of the separation from Lily. The report from the independent evaluation, when it was finally ready, was categorical in its conclusions. The multidisciplinary team determined that Lily was suffering from severe separation trauma and that her special neurological condition made her particularly vulnerable to abrupt changes in her care environment. The report recommended an immediate return to Eleanor's custody, with social and financial support to ensure the continuity of specialized treatments. But even with the favorable opinion, the bureaucratic system continued to impose obstacles that seemed endless. Miss Lewis challenged the independent report and demanded a second evaluation, prolonging Lily's suffering and Eleanor's anguish. The legal battle was consuming not only the family's financial resources, but also their emotional resilience to continue facing a system that seemed determined to keep them apart. The months of separation took a devastating toll on Lily's mental and physical health. The girl had lost more than 10 pounds, an alarming amount for someone her size, and developed a condition of selective mutism that made her communicate only through drawings. The shelter's psychologists tried different therapeutic approaches, but nothing could break the emotional barrier the child had built around herself. Eleanor, for her part, lived each day as a battle against despair. The tiny apartment in Oakwood City became a territory of suffering where she spent sleepless nights, poring over legal documents and trying to find some loophole in the system that could speed up Lily's return. Her own health conditions deteriorated, with frequent episodes of hypertension that led her to the emergency room several times. Samuel became not just a business partner, but the emotional pillar that kept Eleanor functioning during the most difficult times. He had expanded the candy sales network to several bakeries and restaurants in the city, generating a modest but stable income that allowed them to pay legal expenses and keep the apartment. But his greatest value was in the constant emotional support he offered the old woman. During one of the weekly visits to the shelter, something extraordinary and terrible happened simultaneously. Lily, who hadn't spoken to anyone for weeks, whispered a sentence to Eleanor that chilled the old woman's blood. "Are you going to disappear too, like my mommy did?" The revelation that Lily remembered her biological mother brought a new dimension to the trauma she was experiencing. Mr. Reginald Cole received this information as a crucial piece of the legal puzzle. If Lily had memories of Irene Vance, this could provide clues about the biological mother's whereabouts and perhaps clarify the circumstances of the abandonment. The lawyer requested a special session with a psychologist specializing in the recovery of childhood memories to try to extract more information from the girl. The therapy session revealed disturbing fragments of Lily's previous life. Through drawings, the girl described a woman who cried constantly, a dark house where there was never enough food, and men who yelled very loudly at night. Her memories were fragmented and confused, typical of a child who has experienced trauma, but they provided clues that Irene had faced situations of domestic violence before abandoning her daughter. Meanwhile, the second evaluation requested by Ms. Lewis was being conducted by a different team, apparently less favorable to Lily's return to Eleanor. The new report emphasized the old woman's age limitations and questioned her ability to handle future crises related to the girl's special neurological condition. The bureaucracy seemed determined to find reasons to maintain the separation. It was at this critical moment that an unexpected discovery completely changed the course of the case. Samuel, who continued to investigate the family's past on his own, found records that Irene Vance had sought help at a support center for female victims of domestic violence in Somerville, a town near Havenwood, a few months before Lily's birth. The support center still had some archived records, and the responsible social worker, Mrs. Marcia Oliveira, vaguely remembered Irene. The young woman had arrived pregnant and in a state of panic, talking about a violent man who was chasing her and threatening to hurt the baby she was expecting. She had stayed at the shelter for a few weeks, but disappeared one night without a trace. The information that Irene had fled to protect Lily from a violent abuser brought a new perspective on the girl's abandonment. It had not been a decision of maternal rejection, but a desperate act of a mother trying to save her daughter from a dangerous situation. This explained why she had left the child at Rosary Church, a place she considered safe and sacred. Mr. Cole used this new information to build a more robust legal argument about Lily's situation. The girl was not simply an abandoned child, but a survivor of domestic violence who had found safety and love in Eleanor's care. Removing her from this stable environment constituted a re-victimization that violated her fundamental rights. Parallel to the discoveries about Irene, Eleanor and Samuel's financial situation improved significantly when a large bakery became interested in the special blackberry caramels. The owner, Mr. Anthony Miller, offered an exclusive supply contract that would guarantee a substantial and stable income for the pair. It was the financial stability they had been seeking, arriving at the moment they needed it most. But the financial improvement came with a requirement that further complicated the situation. Mr. Miller wanted the production to be done in a licensed industrial kitchen, which meant Eleanor and Samuel would have to invest in proper equipment and facilities. The initial cost was high, but the potential return justified the investment if they could get access to a bank loan. The irony of the situation was not lost on them. At the moment they finally had a real opportunity for financial stability, Lily was in a shelter where she could not benefit from this change. Eleanor felt frustrated that she couldn't share the good news with the girl, and that financial success had come too late to prevent the separation. During a particularly painful visit, Lily made a drawing that shocked everyone. It was an image of two figures, one large and one small, separated by a high wall with barbed wire. In the drawing, the small figure was crying tears that formed a river leading to the large figure, as if her sorrows could cross any physical barrier to reach the one she loved. The drawing was interpreted by psychologists as a clear representation of the separation trauma Lily was experiencing. The girl understood that there was an institutional barrier preventing her reunion with Eleanor, and she expressed through art the pain she could not verbalize. The emotional impact of the image was so strong that some shelter staff began to publicly question whether they were doing what was best for the child. Dr. Patricia Morse, the shelter coordinator, made a courageous decision that could cost her her career. She prepared a detailed report documenting Lily's deterioration during the separation and officially recommending her return to Eleanor, even if it meant contradicting the guidelines of her own supervisor. The report emphasized that keeping them separate was causing irreversible damage to the child's development. The tension between different sectors of the child protection system began to intensify. On one side were professionals like Dr. Morse and Jennifer Matthews, who witnessed Lily's suffering daily and believed in the bond with Eleanor. On the other were administrators like Ms. Lewis, who prioritized bureaucratic criteria over emotional considerations. Lily's case started to gain local media attention when a journalist, Anna Peterson, learned of the story through a source in the judicial system. The report highlighted the contradictions of a system that separated a child from a loving caregiver for financial reasons, while keeping her institutionalized at a much higher cost to the state. The public exposure brought additional pressure on the agencies responsible for the case. The report also had an unexpected effect. Several people from the Havenwood community mobilized to support Eleanor, organizing fundraising campaigns and politically pressuring for a quick resolution of the case. The small candy business that had started as a necessity for survival became a symbol of family resistance that touched the hearts of many people. But while public support grew, Lily's health continued to deteriorate rapidly. The girl had developed various self-harming behaviors and fainting spells that deeply alarmed the medical team. It was a race against time to resolve the legal situation before the psychological damage became irreversible, putting unbearable pressure on everyone involved in the family reunification process. The community's mobilization in support of Eleanor and Lily brought unexpected consequences that further complicated the situation. Ms. Lewis, feeling pressured by the media exposure and public criticism of her work, decided to harden her position and accelerate the process of placing Lily in a permanent adoptive family. The supervisor argued that the media exposure was harming the child's well-being and that it was necessary to resolve the case definitively. The news that Lily would be placed for adoption came as a devastating blow to Eleanor. Mr. Cole explained that once the adoption process began, it would be extremely difficult to reverse it, even if they could later prove that the separation had been improper. It was a desperate race against time, where every day lost could mean the permanent loss of the girl. Samuel, determined not to let the family be definitively separated, made a drastic decision. He mortgaged his own house in Pine Ridge to get immediate financial resources and hired a child rights specialist from Atlanta, Mr. Fernando Maya, known for winning complex cases against the child protection system. Mr. Maya analyzed the case with a different perspective from the local lawyers. He identified several procedural violations that had been committed during Lily's removal from Eleanor's custody, including the lack of a gradual adaptation period and the absence of adequate consideration for the emotional bond established between the child and her caregiver. In parallel, an unexpected discovery came through Pastor Mike, who had stayed in contact with Eleanor throughout the ordeal. The clergyman received a visit from a woman named Rita Dawson, who identified herself as a retired nurse and said she had important information about Lily's case. The woman had worked at the municipal hospital at the time of the girl's birth and had specific recollections of Irene Vance. Rita explained that Irene had not fled the hospital out of irresponsibility, as the official record stated. In fact, she had been threatened by a violent man who showed up at the maternity ward looking for her and the baby. The young mother fled during the night to protect her daughter, taking only the birth documents and a small amount of money she had managed to hide. The nurse also revealed crucial information about the fire that destroyed the hospital records. She had overheard conversations among administrators suggesting that the incident was not accidental, but an attempt to cover up problematic cases of medical negligence and irregular situations that could compromise the institution's reputation. Irene's case was among the records that were deliberately destroyed. This new evidence significantly strengthened the legal argument that Lily had been a victim of a flawed system since birth. Mr. Meyer prepared a formal petition alleging that the girl was entitled to historical reparation for the institutional errors that had harmed her family and that separating her from Eleanor constituted a continuation of those same errors. While the legal battle intensified, Lily's condition at the shelter reached a critical point. The girl had completely stopped eating and was hospitalized for severe dehydration. The doctors warned that her condition was becoming dangerous, with signs of deep depression that could have permanent consequences for her already compromised neurological development. Dr. Mark Roberts, who had been following the case from the beginning, made a direct appeal to the responsible authorities, arguing that keeping Lily separated from Eleanor under these conditions constituted a form of institutional violence. He threatened to report the case to the state medical board if urgent measures were not taken to protect the child's health. The medical pressure, combined with legal and community mobilization, finally began to create cracks in the bureaucratic system that kept Lily away from Eleanor. Jennifer Matthews, who had been forced to follow orders that contradicted her professional convictions, decided to take a public stand in favor of family reunification, even at the risk of her own career. In a tense hearing in family court, Mr. Meyer presented all the collected evidence, including the medical testimony about Lily's deterioration, the irregularities in the separation process, and the new information about the circumstances that led to the child's initial abandonment. The presiding judge, Judge Martha Sanders, was visibly impressed by the complexity of the case. During the hearing, something extraordinary happened. Lily, who had been brought to the courtroom for an in-person evaluation, saw Eleanor for the first time in 2 weeks and ran to her, completely ignoring the social worker's instructions. The girl clung to the old woman with desperate force, crying and repeating, "Grandma, Grandma," while Eleanor also broke down. In tears, the scene moved everyone in the room, including Ms. Lewis, who for the first time seemed to question her own decisions. The bond between Eleanor and Lily was so evident and profound that denying it seemed a needless cruelty. Even the most rigid employees of the system could not ignore the strength of the emotional connection they witnessed. Judge Sanders temporarily suspended the adoption process and ordered an urgent independent evaluation by a team of psychologists specializing in family bonding. The judge determined that while they awaited this evaluation, Lily could have daily visits with Eleanor, supervised at first, but with the possibility of becoming progressively less restrictive. The daily visits immediately transformed Lily's condition. The girl started eating again, smiling occasionally, and showed significant improvements in her overall behavior. It was clear evidence that her condition was directly related to the separation from Eleanor, further strengthening the argument for permanent reunification. Eleanor, in turn, used this period of visits to demonstrate her total dedication to Lily's well-being. She brought homemade food, helped with therapy exercises, and showed a deep knowledge of the girl's specific needs that impressed the shelter professionals. It was evident that she was not just a loving caregiver, but someone who truly understood Lily's special needs. The report from the independent evaluation, when it was finally completed, was categorical in its recommendations. The multidisciplinary team determined that Lily had a secure attachment bond with Eleanor and that the separation was causing severe trauma that could have permanent consequences. The report recommended the immediate return of the child to the old woman's custody with adequate social and financial support. Samuel, who had followed the entire process, used this favorable moment to present a detailed business plan for the expansion of the candy production. With the bakery contract and community support, they had managed to establish a solid financial base that guaranteed not only the family's sustainability, but also adequate resources for Lily's specialized treatment. The combination of medical, psychological, legal, and financial evidence created an irrefutable case for family reunification. But Ms. Lewis, reluctant to admit her mistakes, still tried to present technical objections that could further delay the final decision. It was a final battle between inflexible bureaucracy and human justice that would determine the fate of a family that had fought against all odds to stay together. The final decision from Judge Martha Sanders came on a rainy September morning as the first spring blossoms began to bloom in the gardens of Oakwood City. The magistrate summoned all parties involved for a definitive hearing where Lily's future would be permanently determined. The weight of responsibility was evident in her serious demeanor as she reviewed all the case documents one last time. Eleanor arrived at the courthouse accompanied by Samuel, wearing her best dress and carrying a folder with photographs documenting the happy moments she had shared with Lily. Her hands trembled slightly, not just from age, but from the tension of knowing that the next few hours would determine if she could raise the girl she considered her granddaughter of the heart. Mr. Fernando Maya had meticulously prepared his final argument, organizing all the evidence collected over months of investigation. He knew he had a strong case, but he also understood that judicial decisions did not always follow the pure logic of evidence, especially when they involved complex emotional issues like unconventional family bonds. Ms. Lewis arrived accompanied by her own lawyer, Ms. Christina Bowers, determined to defend her position to the end. She had prepared arguments focused on Eleanor's advanced age and the practical limitations this could pose for the long-term care of a child with special needs. Her strategy was to appeal to practical considerations about the distant future. When Lily was brought into the courtroom, the change in her appearance shocked everyone. Although the daily visits with Eleanor had significantly improved her condition, she was still visibly thinner and more fragile than before the separation. Her large eyes immediately searched for Eleanor in the room, and a shy smile lit up her face when she found her. Judge Sanders began the hearing by acknowledging the exceptional complexity of the case and the need to consider not only legal aspects but also the emotional and psychological well-being of a vulnerable child. She had studied all the reports and evidence presented in depth, and her expression suggested she had already formed an opinion on the situation. Mr. Meyer presented his final argument with eloquence and passion, highlighting that Lily had found in Eleanor not just a caregiver, but a true family that respected her special needs and provided the unconditional love necessary for her development. He emphasized that separating a child from such a strong bond constituted unnecessary violence. Ms. Bowers counter-argued by focusing on the practical limitations of Eleanor's age and questioning her ability to handle future medical crises or emergencies related to Lily's neurological condition. She suggested that love, while important, was not enough to guarantee the long-term specialized care the child would need. During the arguments, something unexpected happened. Lily, who was sitting quietly next to a social worker, stood up and walked to the center of the room. In her small but clear voice, she said something that completely silenced the court. "Please, let me stay with Grandma Eleanor. She teaches me how to make sweets and sings the songs my mommy used to sing." Lily's spontaneous intervention was a decisive moment that deeply touched everyone present. It was the first time the girl had spoken publicly about her feelings regarding the separation, and her simple words carried an emotional weight that no legal argument could match. Judge Sanders called a brief recess to consider this unexpected manifestation. During the break, Jennifer Matthews approached Eleanor and, with tears in her eyes, apologized for the suffering that had been caused. She explained that she had been forced to follow superior orders, but had always believed that Lily belonged to the family that Eleanor and Samuel had formed. Her public confession further strengthened Eleanor's position. When the session resumed, Judge Sanders made a statement that changed the course of everything. She had decided not only to authorize Lily's return to Eleanor, but also to order that the child protection system provide ongoing support to ensure that all the child's needs were adequately met. It was a solution that recognized both the family bond and Lily's special practical needs. The judge also ordered that Ms. Lewis be transferred to another department, acknowledging that her decisions in the case had been inappropriate and harmful to the child's well-being. Jennifer Matthews was assigned as the social worker responsible for the family's ongoing monitoring, a choice that deeply pleased Eleanor and Lily. Furthermore, the court established a special fund to cover the cost of Lily's specialized medical treatment, ensuring she had access to all the resources necessary for her proper development. The fund would be financed partly by the state and partly by contributions from the community that had mobilized in support of the family. The news of the decision spread quickly, and their exit from the courthouse was marked by a small crowd of supporters who had followed the case through the local media. Eleanor, Samuel, and Lily were greeted with applause and flowers in a show of affection that deeply moved the officially reunited family. The return home was a moment of pure joy for Lily, who ran through the rooms of the apartment as if rediscovering it after a long journey. She hugged every familiar object, touched every surface, and asked Eleanor to immediately prepare her favorite sweets. It was as if she wanted to physically reconnect with all the elements of her previous life. That night, Lily slept in Eleanor's bed, something that hadn't happened since before the separation. The girl clung to the old woman as if she feared someone might take her away again during the night. Eleanor stayed awake for hours, watching the child's peaceful breathing and silently giving thanks for having her family back. Samuel, who had sacrificed so much to help in the legal fight, finally allowed himself to relax and dream about the family's future. He had become not just a business partner, but a true member of the family, and now they could focus on expanding the business and creating a stable and prosperous future for Lily. In the following days, the family routine was gradually re-established. Lily went back to helping in the kitchen, demonstrating that she had not lost her exceptional culinary skills. Her intuitive knowledge of recipes and flavor combinations remained impressive, and she began to suggest new creations that could further expand the commercial success of the family's sweets. The first week after the reunification brought challenges of readjustment, but also simple joys that had been denied during the months of separation. Lily started singing the old songs that Hope had taught through the generations again, her sweet voice echoing through the house and bringing back the music that had been absent during the dark period of separation. The case of Eleanor and Lily became a landmark in the region, influencing changes in local child protection policies to give greater weight to established emotional bonds. It was a victory that transcended their specific family, benefiting other children and families who might face similar situations in the future. 6 months after the reunification, the family's life had found a prosperous and stable rhythm that seemed to compensate for all the previous suffering. The small candy company, the Vance sisters, a name chosen in honor of Eleanor and Hope, had grown significantly, supplying products to more than 15 establishments in Oakwood City and neighboring towns. Lily, now 5, had become the unofficial star of the company, always present during deliveries and enchanting customers with her sweet personality. The commercial success brought financial stability that allowed Eleanor to provide Lily with all the specialized treatments she needed. The girl regularly attended occupational therapy sessions, neurological follow-ups, and had started attending a specialized school that knew how to properly handle her specific needs. Her development had accelerated remarkably, and she showed surprising academic skills, especially in math and science. Samuel had moved permanently to Oakwood City and had become an integral partner in the family, not only in business, but also in the daily care of Lily. The girl called him Uncle Samuel, and had developed a special relationship with him based on music and family stories. He taught her to play the guitar in their spare time, and Lily showed a natural musical talent that perfectly complemented her culinary skills. But amidst all this prosperity and happiness, an unexpected event came to shake the tranquility they had achieved. On a typical Monday morning, while Lily was playing in the yard of their new house, they had bought a larger property to accommodate the expanded candy production. She began to cry inconsolably for no apparent reason. Eleanor ran to see what had happened, but Lily couldn't explain the reason for her sadness. She just kept repeating that she missed someone she didn't know, a strange feeling that left her deeply melancholic. It was a new behavior that worried Eleanor, especially since it coincided with the period when the girl had turned 5, the same age she was when she was found as a baby. Dr. Mark Roberts, who continued to monitor Lily's development, suggested that these episodes of inexplicable sadness could be related to deeply buried memories from early childhood. He explained that sometimes children who have suffered early trauma develop a kind of body memory that manifests on specific dates or in specific situations, even if they have no conscious recollection of the original events. During a particularly productive therapy session, Lily managed to express through drawings some of the images that appeared in her mind during the episodes of sadness. She drew a young woman crying, holding a small baby, and in the background, a dark male figure that emanated a sense of danger. The drawings were disturbing in their simplicity, but provided important clues about the fragmented memories emerging from her subconscious. Dr. Evelyn Reed, who had resumed Lily's psychological follow-up after the reunification, interpreted the drawings as possible fragments of real memories from the girl's first days of life. It was likely that she had witnessed, even as a baby, her biological mother's moments of despair before the abandonment. These pre-verbal memories were emerging now that she felt safe enough to process them. The revelation that Lily carried such early traumatic memories brought a new dimension to her therapeutic follow-up. Eleanor felt simultaneously grateful to finally understand the origin of Lily's occasional sadness and worried about the possibility that these traumas could affect her future development. Even more specialized care was needed to help the girl process these memories in a healthy way. During this period of intensified psychological treatment, something extraordinary happened that would again change the course of the family's life. Rita Dawson, the retired nurse who had provided crucial information about Irene Vance during the legal process, contacted Eleanor with news she had long stopped expecting. Rita had continued to quietly investigate Irene's whereabouts, moved by compassion for Lily's story and the desire to help complete the family puzzle. Through her network of contacts in the health field, she had discovered that a woman with characteristics similar to Irene's was hospitalized in a psychological rehabilitation clinic in Atlanta, where she was receiving treatment for trauma related to domestic violence. The information that Irene might be alive and relatively close created a complex emotional dilemma for Eleanor. On one hand, there was the possibility of finally reuniting Lily with her biological mother, completing the family's healing in a way she had never imagined. On the other hand, there was the fear that this reunion might re-traumatize Lily or destabilize the family they had built with so much effort. Samuel, always pragmatic in his approach to family problems, suggested they seek more information about Irene's current condition before making any decision about a possible contact. It was important to know if she was emotionally and mentally stable enough for a reunion with her daughter, and what her intentions regarding Lily would be if it really was her. Mr. Cole, who had become more than just a lawyer to the family, offered to discreetly investigate the situation of the woman hospitalized in Atlanta. He had contacts in the capital who could verify the patient's identity without alerting her to the investigation, allowing the family to make an informed decision about the next steps. While they awaited the results of the investigation, Lily continued to have occasional episodes of inexplicable melancholy, But now, Eleanor and Samuel were better prepared to handle these situations. They had learned that talking about feelings, even when the girl couldn't fully explain them, helped to lessen the intensity of the emotions that disturbed her. The candy factory's routine continued to provide stability and purpose for the whole family. Lily had become even more creative in her culinary suggestions, developing recipes that combined regional ingredients in innovative ways. Her blackberry caramels with white chocolate became the company's best-selling product, and customers came from distant cities specifically to buy the prodigy's creations. The recognition of Lily's culinary talent brought regional media attention, but Eleanor and Samuel were careful to protect the girl's privacy. They allowed reports on the products, but always focused on family tradition and artisanal quality, avoiding the exploration of the traumatic personal history that had led to the family's formation. During an interview for a local gastronomy magazine, Lily made an observation that surprised the journalists present. She said that every candy she created was like a love letter to people she hadn't met yet, a way of spreading happiness to families that might be going through difficulties as she once had. The emotional maturity of her response impressed everyone and generated a touching report on how cooking can be a form of healing and human connection. The report had a wider reach than expected, being republished in several cities in Georgia and even reaching Atlanta. It was exposure that, although positive, left Eleanor slightly worried about the possibility of people from Lily's traumatic past coming to look for them. She had learned to be cautious with publicity, even when it was well-intentioned. It was in this context of success mixed with caution that news arrived from Mr. Cole about the investigation in Atlanta. The confirmation of the identity of the hospitalized woman brought a mix of hope and apprehension that would leave the family facing the most difficult decision they had ever faced, whether or not they should try to reunite Lily with the mother who had abandoned her to protect her and who was now trying to heal from her own wounds left by violence and trauma. The confirmation that Irene Vance was indeed in the Atlanta clinic came on a golden October afternoon, as the yellow tabebuya blossoms began to color the streets of Oakwood City. Mr. Cole had obtained detailed information about the recovery status of the young mother who had left Lily 5 years ago to protect her from the domestic violence that plagued her life. Irene, now 25, was in an advanced stage of recovery after 2 years of intensive treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder and severe depression. According to the medical reports Mr. Cole had managed to access discreetly, she had shown significant progress and constantly expressed a desire to reunite with the daughter she had been forced to abandon. More importantly, she had repeatedly asked about a child named Lily, definitively confirming her identity. The revelation brought a whirlwind of emotions for Eleanor. On one hand, there was the joy of knowing that Lily's biological mother was alive and recovering. On the other, there was the understandable fear that this reunion might destabilize the stable and happy life they had built together. Lily had become her daughter in every emotional sense, and the prospect of sharing her with another person, even her biological mother, was terrifying. Samuel, always sensible in his approaches, suggested they consult Dr. Reed about the best way to handle the situation. The psychologist had accompanied Lily throughout her healing journey and would be the most qualified person to assess how the girl might react to the news about her biological mother and a possible reunion. During a special session, Dr. Reed carefully talked with Lily about memories of her biological mother, using age-appropriate techniques. To everyone's surprise, Lily showed an intuitive understanding of the situation that went beyond her 5 years. She said she sometimes dreamed of the lady who cried and sang sad songs, and that she felt this person needed help, just as she had needed when Eleanor found her. Lily's emotional maturity in processing this information deeply impressed the adults around her. When Dr. Reed gently explained that her biological mother was alive and recovering from an illness, Lily asked if she could help her mom get better, just as Eleanor had helped her. It was a response that revealed both her capacity for forgiveness and her natural understanding of healing and family. After several family conversations and professional consultations, it was decided they would contact the clinic in Atlanta to arrange a carefully supervised meeting between Irene and Lily. The first contact would be through letters, allowing mother and daughter to get to know each other gradually before a face-to-face meeting that could be emotionally intense for both. Irene's first letter to Lily arrived on a November morning, written on simple paper but with careful handwriting that revealed the young mother's love and nervousness. In it, Irene explained in simple words that she had been forced to leave Lily when she was a baby to protect her from dangerous people, but that she had never stopped thinking about her and waiting for the day they could be reunited. Lily listened attentively as Eleanor read the letter aloud, and her response was simple but touching. She dictated a letter back, saying she understood her mom had done what she had to do to keep her safe, and that she was now happy and learning to make sweets with Grandma Eleanor and Uncle Samuel. She also included a drawing of the family she had formed, showing there was room for more people if they wanted to join. The exchange of letters continued for several weeks, gradually building an emotional bridge between mother and daughter that had been interrupted by violence and trauma. Irene shared details about her recovery and her plans for the future, while Lily told her about her life at school, her favorite sweets, and the songs she had learned from Samuel. The first face-to-face meeting was scheduled for a December afternoon at the clinic in Atlanta itself, with medical and psychological supervision. Eleanor, Samuel, and Lily made the trip in contemplative silence, each processing their own expectations and fears about this moment that had been both dreamed of and dreaded. When Irene entered the visiting room, the physical resemblance to Lily was undeniable. She had the same large, expressive eyes, the same dark, wavy hair, and a fragility that contrasted with the inner strength that was beginning to emerge during her recovery. Lily watched her carefully before approaching slowly, as if recognizing something familiar, yet distant. The meeting was emotionally intense, but also surprisingly natural. Irene cried when she saw how her daughter had grown up healthy and happy, and Lily showed extraordinary empathy, offering one of the sweets she had brought to help Mommy Irene get better. The interaction revealed that both had matured and healed enough to build a healthy relationship. During the hours they spent together, Irene expressed deep gratitude to Eleanor and Samuel for having taken such good care of Lily. She clarified that she had no intention of taking the girl from the family that had raised her, but she would like to be part of her daughter's life in some way, if that was possible and beneficial for everyone involved. The solution that emerged naturally from the conversations was an expanded family where everyone would have important roles in Lily's life. Irene would continue her treatment and gradually integrate into her daughter's life, while Eleanor and Samuel would remain as the primary caregivers and the girl's main family. It was an unconventional arrangement, but one that respected the bonds that had been formed and the needs of everyone involved. When they returned to Oakwood City, Lily was visibly more complete. The episodes of inexplicable melancholy ceased completely, as if finding her biological mother had filled a void she didn't even know existed. She spoke of Mommy Irene with affection, but made it clear that her home was still with Grandma Eleanor and Uncle Samuel. 6 months later, Irene was discharged from the clinic and decided to move to Oakwood City to be close to Lily. She found a job as an administrative assistant at a local school and rented a small apartment where Lily could visit her regularly. The transition was gradual and careful, always prioritizing the child's emotional well-being. The small factory, the Vance sisters, benefited from Irene's arrival as she brought administrative skills that helped to better organize the growing business. She also had a natural talent for sales that perfectly complemented the culinary skills of Lily and the experience of Eleanor and Samuel. On the first anniversary of the reunion, the extended family threw a party that celebrated not only the reunification, but the entire journey of healing and growth they had traveled together. Lily, now 6, had become a confident and cheerful child, surrounded by 4 adults who loved her unconditionally and were committed to her well-being. The story that had begun with a lost child saving an elderly woman in danger had transformed into a saga of family, forgiveness, and second chances. Lily grew up understanding that family is not just about blood, but about the people who choose to love, protect, and care for one another through all of life's difficulties. Years later, when Lily became an adult, she would continue to tell this story as an example that even in the most difficult situations, love and determination can create everyday miracles that turn pain into hope and loneliness into family. If you like this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story, giving it a score from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.